Hey, Rach, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Good.
Good.
Good. So I think you and I have talked about this quite a bit, and I know that we see this in a lot of different places. People going, oh, like, why is Courtney such a villain? And, why do people dislike her? Like, oh, the crazy lies about her murdering Kurt or Kristen. These are one thing. These are kind of one thing. And I know when I've ever tried to make people understand that this person that they like so much is not a feminist. She's not a good person. And I don't care if you believe in science and you understand now that she did actually murder Kurt and did, I believe, again, I believe we don't have the science to prove that she hurt Kristen, but I believe she had something to do with
Yeah.
that. However, we
Yeah.
do have the forensic proof that she murdered Kurt. But here's
Yeah.
something else that we know. So take Kurt out of it, take Kristen out of it. Um, she has murdered animals. And there are the things where they talk about Frances, and a few people are like, oh, accidentally or negligence caused her to hurt animals. We're going to talk to you guys a little bit later about when she, as an adult, very went out of her way,
Intentionally.
intentionally murdered animals. Like these would be murder in the first degree if animals were given the same rights as humans, which they should be. But
Yeah.
so yes, this is first degree murder. This is premeditated, and she has done this to animals. And so let's start talking about that. Um, I just wanted to mention Courtney's mom, Linda Carroll, wrote a book and talked a lot about her daughter. And I don't have the book with me, but so we'll just give an honorable mention. If someone knows the exact quote from the book, please post it in the
Yeah.
comments. We'll add it. That would be amazing. She's talking about Courtney as a small child, and Courtney has a puppy, and the puppy breaks its leg. Now, I believe that Linda said Courtney may have had something to do with the puppy breaking its leg. I believe she
Or
said
she suspected it. Yeah.
yes. But the very strange part is that Courtney didn't seem to care and couldn't understand the puppy's pain, which I find very bizarre.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
even small children generally understand that,
Pain. Yeah. They
yeah,
understand pain. Well, and, maybe this is going a little bit too far. But one of the signs documented at this point of psychopaths is hurting animals in childhood.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So we're just going to leave that as a little note. Everything else
yeah.
we have is very well documented, written down. I mean, that was written down. So again, if you have that book, please leave us the quote. That would be amazing. So
Yeah.
let's go ahead and let's talk about what Courtney's father had to say about her and animals. So you've got Hank's book there.
I do. I've got Love Kills: The Assassination of Kurt Cobain by Hank Harrison. And he's got a whole chapter called Falling James in Love. It's a pretty short chapter, so I'm just going to read you guys the whole thing. It's like 3.5 pages total, maybe. Um,
Perfect.
while we're on the topic of old boyfriends, let's take a closer look at Courtney's first husband, quote unquote, falling James Moreland, the cross dressing heterosexual rock star and founder of the pioneering alternative band known as Leaving Trains. Moreland, who got his moniker from falling down on stage as part of his act, is a sincere and dedicated musician with real talent and some rather stylish frocks. James got on board with the Love Train just about the time she came back from Minneapolis. That's about the time I lost track of her and about the time she got kicked out of Babes in Toyland for trying to run the whole scene. It's also about the time some butthole surfer gig money went mysteriously southward. Make it late 1987. She was mostly over Rezebek by that time, although Melissa Rossi claims she held a grudge against Roz for at least 10 years. Nor was she swooning over Jeff Mann. She did remain in touch with Bernadette Mann up in Topanga, but that was because Bernadette could always fix her up with quote unquote jobs. No, this time Courtney was smarting from peer group rejection, the kind of thing that happened in Portland when she was too young to make the club scene and too old to be a teeny bopper. This time she needed more than a trick suit and a handful of phone numbers to bail her out. Courtney needed to be in a band. She fed off the band fantasy. All of her hostility for Rezebek, her ideal image of a rock star, got channeled into an I'll show him attitude. She knew she could make it in the movies, but rock star fame was, at least in her warped sense of values, more powerful than movie star fame. In the meantime, she needed to tread water. That's where James Moreland comes in. According to James, Courtney took his soul and stepped on it and then proceeded to steal his stage persona. Courtney's patented pose, the leg up on the monitor with no underpants, is a direct derivative of Moreland's act. But Moreland did it for comedy. Frankly, nobody wanted to ogle his balls. Courtney's milky underpants, au contraire, were far more attractive. In a glib comment, she told James, "There is only room at the top for one blonde female rock star, and I'm it." He took this to mean she was on her way to knock off Madonna. James also relates that during the years he lived with Courtney, she acted on that get Madonna premise as if it were her guiding light, as if it was based on an axis of absolute truth, even going so far as to fantasize about how she could have Madonna assassinated. This must have made things pretty tense 5 years later when Madonna's record company found itself bidding against David Geffen for Courtney's contract. Courtney's entire career in Los Angeles circa 1985 took on the appearance of her own personality. One minute she saw herself spinning endlessly with Toto on an Oz-like whirlwind of parties and dope. The next she would find herself in a downward vortex. Again, like a true narcissist, anytime she received any negative publicity, she went nuts. And due to her own inability to sail through crisis without warfare, she often fell on her own landmines. According to Moreland, she couldn't accept constructive criticism. Anyone even remotely negative became the enemy. A little research proved shocking. Courtney did more than dump Moreland. She dumped his baby, too. That's right, folks. Courtney found herself pregnant with Moreland's child in 1988, but just kept on shooting heroin, methadone via the clinic oral route, drinking, and nicotine. According to Moreland, he begged her to keep the baby and stop indulging in abusive stuff. But as the first trimester barrier approached, Courtney just called a cab and, without a whisper to James, had another abortion. After that, James knew he wanted out of the marriage and took steps to kick Courtney out of his life. She was never officially in his band in the first place, but thinking of herself as a member of a band, however dim, served as a kind of security blanket. She wasn't rejected or abandoned if she was in a gang setting. In her correction letter to Melissa Rossi, Courtney does not mention the havoc she caused leaving trains, but her life with James was chaotic and their breakup bitter, violent, and well documented. Although he was at least a foot taller than her, she physically slapped him around and verbally berated him in public every day. I know how that feels. She threatened to have him killed or maimed, and James felt she meant it. Like Kurt, Moreland became her whipping boy. According to James and members of his band, Courtney turned into a PMS cranker, causing the bag and jaw jacking. Other sources confirm this. I thought she was just plain mean. According to Moreland and some people from other bands, she stayed strung out on heroin and did more speed and drank more vodka than any three people around. When she did send me letters, they made no sense. Her whole existence in that 1987 to 88 period was out of control. Her capacity for drug abuse almost outdistanced her capacity to abuse others, especially those she claimed to love. Why did Moreland take this abuse? In a 1996 recorded telephone interview, Moreland begged me to believe him, as if he was the only man who ever had a credibility problem after knowing Courtney. I assured him I would approach the topic as objectively as I could. James understood that I was laboring under restraints. During the long-hour chat, James told me he took the abuse because he genuinely loved Courtney, a familiar refrain, but eventually even an old trooper like Moreland couldn't take the emotional pain. He begged Courtney to go into rehab, but each time he brought up the topic, she threatened to have him killed or kneecapped. At first, James thought she was only exaggerating, bluffing. But as the relationship grew frayed, he got the distinct impression she was capable of extreme violence, almost as if she had another personality. Eventually, some guy did come up and beat him up, saying nothing, and to this day, James thinks Courtney may have sent the thug. Pay attention to this. There's a pattern here. Courtney conveniently failed to hear James begging for a divorce until she got ready to marry Kurt. Then she blithely petitioned for a divorce that Moreland gladly granted. This glibness is a signature trait of all high-functioning sociopaths, and Courtney used any justification to expedite her goals. As part of the quid pro quo for signing the divorce papers, she told James she would give him a career boost once she got established, but this never happened. The truth is, Courtney often made promises she had no intention of keeping. Once she married the king of grunge, Courtney was beholden to no one. However, after James told her he was talking to me, almost as if talking to me carried a death sentence and he was defying the edict, he grew mysteriously silent. She must have got him a gig somewhere. Ignoring a promise is only one part of the picture. Courtney often used jackboot tactics to grind her victims down. To make sure James kept his mouth shut, she put the word out to every club and promoter she knew. Even before she married Kurt, she was wielding power in Nirvana's name, and she still carried a grudge against Moreland. One of the people I interviewed overheard her tell a club owner in Hollywood, "If you ever hire leaving trains, we, meaning Nirvana and Hole, will never work for you again." She even put Moreland's name on a list of security risks, although Moreland was the only one in drag. Courtney liked her men in drag and even managed to get Cobain to drag up every once in a while. Courtney liked to flaunt her trophies, like shrunken heads on a bushman's belt or skulls on a Cossack saddle. Most of her paranoia came out verbally, so it wasn't appended as a writer to a written contract, but the club owners and promoters got the message. Moreland had a black ball in the box. Don was to be tossed out, and I was to be shot on sight. Moreland's earliest vinyls are hard to find, but they are worth a deeper listen because James, like Kurt, managed to blend poetry and music. Obviously, this synthesis attracted Courtney. It was part of the pattern. Courtney subconsciously sought men who could teach her how to make the transmutation, how to synthesize the right brain and the left brain to make the kind of music she needed to make, the kind of sound that would blend with her lyrics. She just never learned how to say thank you. Courtney wanted to be a rock goddess, not just flavor of the month. She wanted everybody to adore her, like I adored her when she was 4. To make this happen, she developed a knack for charming her way into rehearsal halls and studio sessions with various bands. She used the groupie image to catapult herself into an onstage presence. But instead of just standing in the background and singing fills, she tried to take over. She also told her friends that she was writing most of the songs, but that's absurd because she couldn't play well enough in those days. She may have contributed some poetry, but not the music. Her only living ex-husband denies her claims.
So, I mean, he went through, a lot, and like Hank says numerous times, this ends up being a pattern. Was so she, James Moreland is gone, and then is she kind of just flitting around with Billy Corgan looking for her next victim? Is that kind of
I believe so. And I think from the research and stuff I've done, I think Hank's years are a little bit off. Because I believe they got married and divorced, or I think it was technically annulled in 1989. Whereas he's got it in like 87, 88. Um, but yeah, I think it was Roz and then James, and then Billy Corgan and then Kurt.
and is there any indication that she abused Roz as well?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot. I don't have all of it right in front of me, but he's talked quite a bit about how she kind of just forced herself on him,
Oh,
and
that sounds
caused all
familiar.
these, right?
Oh my gosh.
Stole all of his stuff, stole his image, stole his promise to make him this big rock star. Um, yeah, it's it's a repeating thing.
Um,
Um,
so let's talk about, please, anyone feel free to use this portion of the video. I really, really want everyone to understand that Courtney Love has, according to her ex-husband, intentionally premeditated, murdered family pets. So if you
mm,
like Courtney Love, you should fucking think again about your life choices.
yeah.
So this is following James on his Facebook, November 27th, 2018. 18 days of 18 years with Wolfie. Day 1, the origin story. I've always been a cat person, if one has to choose, even though I have also loved and respected and played with and lived with some really cool dogs and other distinctive disparate animal individuals, including a few humans. Before I was rescued by Wolfie Amadeus Noodlehead, the greatest kitty in the history of the universe, I was lucky to have lived with such legendary cats as Mittens, the laconic but secretly adventurous night wanderer who helped raise me, the high-minded and beguiling Paisley, the gentle and kind-hearted Molly, and the charismatic, cunningly vicious charmer, Huey. Despite these wonderful friends and family members, I vowed to never have another cat or pet of my own after two horrifying, sorry, just have to find the next part here. After two horrifying experiences that occurred a long time ago when I was married. At one point, we were living in a house with one of my sisters who had a big, lovable dog named Spit. He was playful but destructive. Despite my sister's and her friends' best efforts, Spit always found ways to break down fences or dig under them. When left alone inside the house, he would smash through the glass panes of windows in the dining room and go running around the neighborhood before trotting back hours later unfazed, with little beads of blood from the window crash dotting his bowling ball thick forehead. Spit was a good dog, but he supposedly attacked an old man during one of his escapades. And one night when we were all sleeping, animal control officers and the police broke into the house and took Spit away forever. The other incident occurred when my wife and I were living in a Hollywood apartment. We had a quiet, reclusive orange cat who kept out of the way but came out to play when the wife was elsewhere. We also had a big young puppy who was one of about a dozen or so rescue dogs being kept in a lot behind a gas station. We came across the dogs in the gas station while on a mission into the desert to help one of my wife's friends bury a diary full of romantic regrets. Our apartment was small, and my wife wasn't the most responsible person in the world, but she'd insisted she wanted that dog, even though within a day of bringing him home, she had already lost interest in him. I didn't mind because by then I had already fallen in love with the dog, who was super friendly and enthusiastic and happy to get attention. I did all the walking and feeding and cleaning, since my wife wasn't capable of such things, and it was fine. Since she was pregnant at the time, having pets seemed like good practice for raising our human baby together in a few months. I already knew I would be both the mom and the dad, and I was exhilarated by the role, seemingly mundane, but also powerfully eternal and natural, being part of the creation and sustenance of life itself. But our marriage was extremely chaotic and confusing, as the wife had issues that made practical, safe, mundane coexistence extremely difficult. One day, on a day in which she was seemingly calm and in a good mood, she killed our dog and cat while I was at work. When I came home, she seemed blithely unaffected, like it was all for the best, that the animals didn't mind. I was gutted. I'm sorry, I just have to say, do you get the sense this is probably what she felt about taking Kurt's life? It's all for the best. Kurt probably didn't mind, right? Yeah, well,
Mm,
Kurt fucking minded,
yeah. Yeah.
and we mind. So this woman
Yeah.
just makes me so angry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Um,
You're fine.
Unaffected, like it was all for the best, that the animals didn't mind. I was gutted. I realized I was living with a monster. I had already seen how troubled she could be, but I hadn't imagined she was capable of such heartless and inexplicable cruelty. It was the end of the marriage for me, although I would stick around for a while longer until she decided to have an abortion.
Yeah.
So,
Um, I I sorry, I don't really have words. Because it's such a blatant lack of any type of regard for anybody but herself. Um, Anybody's feelings, anybody else's pain or needs or wants or life.
yeah,
Um, and I'm sure there are people out there that think animals' lives don't matter as much as human lives.
yeah,
To those people, you can get fucked. They're still
yeah, really
living,
fucked.
breathing things.
That are
Like
in our
they're beings.
protection. We are
Yeah,
so
that
lucky.
are
We're so blessed that we have these beautiful creatures that we get the honor of protecting and caring for,
that
you know?
love you and trust you unconditionally.
Yeah,
They have souls and they feel pain.
yeah.
And um
And
sorry.
then she went about and then she went about making a decision that although of course I believe in a woman's right to choose, it's also a decision that was never discussed. You're in a marriage, that might be a nice thing to talk to your husband about. Not
Mm,
saying that the ultimate decision isn't, still up to the woman, but I mean, again, we're just showing a pattern of what's good for Courtney is good for
yeah,
Courtney, no matter who else it affects or hurts, right?
right.
So now, so for anyone again who says, "Oh, Courtney's great, I love her," check your fucking life choices. Seriously,
Literally.
you have a
Um
problem.
Because I would also like to point out that I'm sure at least part of the reason why she got that abortion is because she had been using heroin the entire time and drinking and using drugs,
Yeah,
um, which she also did while she was pregnant with Francis.
right,
Um, I know that's disputed, and people say that no, she wasn't because of the whole Vanity Fair thing. She admits later on in Montage of Heck that, yeah, she was. She
yeah,
did use heroin in the beginning of her pregnancy with Francis Bean. Um, there's also an article here that goes into a little bit. I don't know if you want me to read this. It's from Far Out
please,
magazine.
yeah,
Um, it goes into a little bit more detail about her marriage and some of the things that she did, and has quotes from uh, Moreland.
perfect.
Um, so this is faroutmagazine.co.uk, is where this article is from. It's written by Tom Taylor. Born in San Francisco in 1964, Courtney Love was welcomed into the hippie world of the Summer of Love from the get go. Her father, Hank Harrison, was even the road manager for the Grateful Dead, of all people, so it seems almost fated that Love would eventually enter the rock and roll industry. However, this world is far from a stable place for a child, and after she spent her early years moving around the world, never mind just the States, she started working as a dancer and taking drugs at the tragically tender age of 16. As Love told The Fix, the first time I tried smack, I was about 16, I guess. It was a horrific experience. At the time, I was working at a dance hall in Taiwan, trying to earn money so I could afford an apartment in San Francisco, she recalled. Continuing, I was utterly broke, so I was sleeping in a bed with a bunch of Brazilian dancers. I got crabs, and I had to get up every night to dance to Gloria Gaynor and Billy Idol's Rebel Rebel. After a while, I was like, get me the fuck out of here. When she did eventually return to America, she decided to make headway in the music industry. Ultimately, she would make this venture a success with Hole. The grunge band released their first single, Retard Girl, in 1990. One of the producers credited for the single is James Moreland, or Falling James, as he is known. A few months before the release, Love's marriage with Moreland was annulled after a mere 3 months together. At the time when they met, Moreland was the transvestite singer of the punk band The Leaving Trains. While in Las Vegas together, Moreland dared Love to marry him, and a few drunken moments later, they were tying the knot. It would seem that wires were crossed thereafter, as Moreland took the marriage seemingly seriously, whereas Love clearly did not. However, matrimony mix-ups aside, Moreland's memories of their time together makes for some very troubling reading. Quote, she definitely has an evil side. She once tried to burn my bed while I was sleeping. A fire started and I woke up in shock, the former punk rocker wrote in Courtney Love, The Real Story. His disconcerting account continues. It's impossible to figure out Courtney's motives. Her disdain was powerful, and she came off as a spoiled little snot. Courtney is a violent person who, even in the midst of our anonymous, crummy, poverty stricken little marriage, threatened to have me beaten up for $200 when I didn't do what she wanted. I was so scared of her, I caved in immediately. It goes without saying that these are merely the accusations of one person, and they prove very difficult to corroborate, but the domestic violence that Moreland has alleged is certainly troubling to read. While Love herself has barely spoken of the marriage other than to say it was the, quote, the stupidest thing she ever did, Moreland has continued to assert his dark accusations against her, fueling the fire that this supposed behavior was a portent of what was to come.
I mean, we could do about 6 episodes of people who have come out talking about how she's abused them. Dog snoring.
Yeah.
Um, but at least, and these are the people who were not, I mean, everyone's scared of her, right? So, especially
Yeah.
back in the day, she had a lot of power. And she threatened people's parents, their children, their pets. We know that we talked about this in a different podcast. She tried to pay someone $5,000 to kill Lynn Hirschberg's dog, I believe, right?
I believe it was, yeah.
Um, so I want to tell you super quickly, killing animals as an adult and what that says clinically. Um, so obviously we know that that can be a sign of psychopathy in children when they do it. But, she obviously taking Linda's statement about Courtney as her daughter, is one thing. Okay, maybe for whatever reason she was developmentally different. She didn't understand the pain of the dog, whatever, she couldn't understand it. But killing pets as an adult, what it says clinically, when adults engage in deliberate, intentional animal killing, especially domestic pets, often a symptom of antisocial personality disorder, which is lack of remorse, impulsivity and aggression, disregard for others' rights, often escalates from manipulation to physical harm. Psychopathy, high functioning sadism, charming on the outside, cold and exploitative underneath, uses harm as a tool to control, punish, or symbolize dominance. Sounding familiar to anybody out there?
Hmm.
Malignant narcissism, grandiosity and cruelty, may kill a pet to punish a person emotionally. Now you feel what I feel. Feeds on the reaction to the violence. Killing pets in childhood is already serious, but doing so as a full-grown adult suggests it's not a phase, it's not impulsive curiosity, it's a conscious act of domination, rage, and psychological warfare. It also suggests premeditation. Most adult animal abusers don't snap, they choose. In a forensic investigation, if Courtney Love killed a cat and dog intentionally, she did, this should be viewed as evidence of violent capacity, a predictor of future harm to people, which she has done to
Hmm.
more. We have
Yeah.
more people saying she did it to people than even animals.
Yeah.
Um, and a behavioral pattern, especially if there's a death, overdose, or manipulation involved in a larger case, like perhaps a husband. In
Hmm.
plain terms, anyone who kills animals for revenge, shock value, or control, especially beloved pets, isn't just troubled, they're dangerous, very dangerous. And if she did, it's not gossip, it's a crime. And it's a massive indicator of what else she's capable of. So now, furthering that pattern, we know that she had taken the lives of some of Francis's pets. Now that was stated as negligence. I'm not sure I buy that at all, but what do we
Um,
know about that?
so there's numerous articles. I'm going to read this one. It's from stuff.co.nz. Um, it says Courtney Love's actions caused the death of the family's pets, her daughter has alleged. Frances Bean Cobain, 19, took out a restraining order against Courtney in 2009, and now the previously sealed deposition documents have been unearthed by the fix. In the sworn court documents, Frances claimed that her cat and dog were both killed due to her mother's hoarding and use of pills. She alleged that her cat died when it got tangled up in fabric, trash, and paperwork in the home, while her pet Pooch was killed after swallowing the troubled singer's pills. Courtney has taken drugs for as long as I can remember, Frances said of her estranged mother. She basically exists now on Xanax, Adderall, Sonata, and Abilify, sugar, and cigarettes. She rarely eats, and she often falls asleep in bed while she is smoking, and I am constantly worried that she will start a fire, which she has done at least 3 times, that will threaten our lives. Um, Courtney has released a new ebook called Courtney Comes Clean, where she talks candidly about her relationship with Frances, her struggle to maintain her sobriety, and her despair when her husband, Kurt Cobain, died in 1994. Mm.
She sounds like someone who has such feelings. She's so empathetic, Rachel. I mean,
Yeah. Uh, cut
it's
me freaking. Sorry.
so here's a question for you then. A cat
Yeah.
gets wound up in all this stuff. Is there no meowing? You don't
Hmm.
hear this cat? I mean, we've all seen, if you've ever lived in an apartment, you've heard neighbors' cats from the doors. If, that is not negligence
Uh,
unless she left the cat, they left it for 2 weeks without even being there. She was in the apartment or house with that cat. She heard that cat,
Oh, without a doubt. My cat causes like he doesn't shut up until you open the door and let him out. Like he will sit
right?
there meowing for a half an hour till you finally get up and let him outside.
And cats know their cries are like babies. Like they've sort of,
Mhm.
I believe it's fairly, well proven that they have developed their meows to sound like babies, which should, flares our maternal signals.
Yep.
So if that cat perished in that way, then Courtney made sure that happened. Period.
Yep.
So
Absolutely. Um, Sorry, I'm trying to find the I found a thing about the restraining order and I'm trying to relocate it. Sorry.
oh, perfect.
Um,
So I want to ask, of people too, when you look at the patterns, let's take Kurt and Courtney's name out of it. If this was a man, who was doing this to a woman, who had set his wife's bed on fire, who had terminated a child, given the day after pill without the person knowing, without giving them the even a cursory conversation, who had murdered the family pets, who had physically abused everyone else they had ever been with, and then that wife ended up dead. Do you think that you and I would be having this conversation?
No.
People,
Uh,
I am a feminist, and let me tell you, that females can murder people. And
oh, and abuse people and
yes,
yeah,
I mean, we are talking about someone who is, in my opinion, right up there with Casey Anthony. That's my opinion. So go ahead and give me some shit in the comments. But you
uh,
know, I she perhaps is even more, I think, had a longer time to abuse people and to premeditate these things. I mean, she's been dreaming about doing these things since she was a child. I don't imagine that a lot of other killers have been dreaming about those things since they were children. This is just
yeah,
simply something that she's always wanted to do. Killer a
yeah,
rock star.
yep.
So,
So I found a little bit more from the deposition, some of the
perfect.
things, reasons why Frances needed a restraining order in
Okay.
2009. In writing, Frances, 19, admits her mother once dragged her to her ex boyfriend's house, James Barber, while she sat in a cab where she witnessed Courtney acting like a quote unquote psycho. Bean says, she took me in a taxi to his house in the middle of the night, and from outside the house in her bare feet, she screamed at him, threw rocks at the house, and threatened to burn his house down. She adds, his children were inside the house, but that did not stop my mother. Um, Frances goes on to say she dealt with other situations nobody's daughter should have to, including Courtney threatening to jump off a balcony, incessant hoarding, as well as personal pets dying due to her mother's easily accessible stash of prescription pills. Um, I just,
I mean, it's so horrible, and I feel so bad for what that beautiful little girl had to endure. No one should have to put up with the things that she did. And I mean, we know other things
yeah,
that, of course, out of respect for the family, we won't talk about publicly, but the amount of abuse that she put that child through.
yeah. Oh, last little bit. The deposition also stated that Courtney once threatened to jump off a balcony while Frances watched. None of
Please,
this was too
bye.
surprising, right? None of this was too surprising considering that in 2003 she told the press about a time she tried to make an overdose fun for the then 11-year-old Frances, who was alone with her as it was happening. So she tried to overdose and make it fun for her 11-year-old daughter that had to sit there and watch.
I'm so glad that Frances had Wendy and Kim, and so sad that she had to so many of her formative years. And I
Yeah.
think, again, this is just our opinion, but you and I have talked about this and we've talked about it with a few other people. And I think that perhaps this is, I don't want to take credit for this assessment, but her not speaking out about her father, even though that we know that from sources who have told us that she knows that her father was taken from her. He did not take his own
Mm.
life. She knows that he was killed. And when we get that changed, I think that will be a relief for her. But in the meantime, it's like, what if the other thing was proven? I think that's so scary for her to think, okay, imagine Courtney growing up with her. Do you think that she said to Francis, he didn't love you enough to stay?
I'm sure there's literally documented proof of her having teaching Francis how to say daddy's a loser and things like that. Like, yeah, she
So this poor, beautiful child had to take on the burden of that her mother's saying that her father did not. I'm going to allege that I can imagine that this is something she would say based on other things and things that we have heard, that it is, not her fault, but she sure as hell didn't help, and Kurt did not love her, which is the absolute opposite of how everyone who knew Kurt said he felt about that child. So yeah, so imagining, you've spent a good part of your life because you grew up with this horrible monster.
yeah.
Um, who has made you feel that you are so much less than because your father didn't stay, right? So this is what
Yeah.
I believe has happened. And then, someone really, really who has a real, a depth of sort of understanding human emotions was like, well, what if because we're trying to figure out why we're not working together with members of Kurt's family who do know
Yeah.
that we have been told
Yeah.
numerous times that they know that Kurt was murdered. And
Yeah.
so what if in your adult life you then go, oh, okay, now I kind of have proof that he didn't leave me on purpose, but then you have to face in court, maybe they can't prove this. And so maybe I'm going to have this worry now all the time in my gut that he didn't love me enough to stay.
Yeah. Well, and also, what if they start it and can't firmly prove it, and now they have this really toxic person that I'm sure for Frances is she's been scared of her entire life.
Yeah.
Um, that now is really angry at her and has a reason
Yeah. Yeah.
to want to hurt
Exactly.
her.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, as angry as it makes me, I can also kind of understand being stuck and not knowing what to do, and that causing just complete inaction.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place of what do I do with all of this information
Yeah.
and all of these feelings. Um, and that's not, I mean, that's not a decision I would wish on anybody, least of all, Kurt's daughter. Um, but yeah, it's,
Unfortunately, too, it's like his, the world deserves the truth, and I'm sorry that it feels like that is going to be a huge hardship on certain people, but again, people keep taking their lives. Again, people are embarrassed to say they like Nirvana because of who they believe Kurt was, and that is completely unfair. And I
yeah,
truly am sorry for any, not for Dylan and the people,
oh,
who
no,
we believe were involved, but, I can't wait to see them in orange jumpsuits. But
yeah,
for everybody else that may be feeling pain because the truth is coming to light, we truly never, that was not something that we've ever want to do. Again, we're just like, we're not making any money. We're just hanging out trying
yeah,
to get, justice for somebody who can no longer speak for himself. So there's nothing, we're gaining nothing by this. So
yeah, no. And it's like, I mean, the last thing I want to do is, rip a band-aid off of
yeah,
a, a really bad wound of the people that knew and loved and cared about him the most. But at the same time, his entire legacy and all of what he worked his entire life to create and poured all of his heart and his passion and his blood, sweat, and tears into is being torn apart and distorted and manipulated and shit all over and made into something that it's not.
yeah,
He's being made into something that he wasn't.
yeah,
And that is almost as bad as the fact that he was killed. Like they're kind of neck and neck.
yeah.
Um, because at least when you die, especially as a celebrity, you've got your legacy and your work that's going to carry on after you. But they have done, or some of them have done all they can to try and ruin that as well and profit off of it and make it, the Courtney show.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And again, imagine if, BTK got to write the narrative for everyone he killed. Are
right.
you kidding me? Like, this is
Right.
crazy. They don't get to, somebody who takes your life should not also get to erase you from existence, the person that you
Exactly.
were. And, I just think it's crazy. And so if, we get a lot of emails, people who have come forward and talked about how Courtney has hurt them or abused them. And so if you would like to send us an email, go ahead. And unfortunately, a lot of these people want to stay private because they're still scared of her.
Yeah.
But, I really think that the more people who come forward and are willing to talk about it, you know, the less scared that we kind of all have to be. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So, well, thank you so much for talking about this with me today. Kind of got,
Absolutely.
I mean, the whole thing was a heavy a heavy subject,
It
but
is,
yeah,
but it's
so
necessary.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. And
they're
yeah,
all parts of his story, and it matters.
and parts of her story. She's
Mhm.
nobody gives any fucks about her anymore now that it's going to come out that all of these people that she abused and the fact that she, did take his life, she'll get some fame from that. So
Yeah.
I hope she
Well, I
enjoys
mean,
it.
most importantly for me, I think understanding her will help
Yeah,
to understand why what happened to him happened.
yeah,
Because you kind of you have to look into the perpetrator just about as much as the victim. So,
yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And, I think people probably saw the warning signs. Unfortunately, Kurt was too roped in. I think we all know how abuse takes its toll on people. So,
mm,
and she was very, very good at that. So,
yeah,
but yeah, so this is not somebody who you're watching a Dateline and you're like, oh, that person killed their spouse. I can't believe it. And then it's like,
yeah,
oh no, I I saw that coming from a long way away.
yeah.
She is not misunderstood. That is not a stage act. She is a nightmare. And our forensic paper proving that Kurt's death was a homicide will be out within the next 4 to 6 weeks. So there's
Can't
that,
wait.
yeah, we're not playing around anymore. This isn't like we think this. No, we know what happened, and soon the rest of the world will too. So,
Yep,
yeah, thank you so much, Rachel, and we will see you next time.
absolutely. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.